Got a brand new Jeep.
I'm so glad you liked
It
it.
is just such a talent.
He is very talented.
Blown away.
What'd you say,
Bert
Halson?
Show.
Bert Show
Bert Show. It
at
just
the
was
Ace Theater.
so good.
You know, he is really talented. And I know him, his wife, and I'm supposed to believe that. But when I saw him when we were first dating, I thought, this guy is actually really talented.
Really?
He's so smart.
Just how do you tell a story? How do you keep it going for that long and have the timing be so perfect? Just the audience was just eating out of his hand at every moment. And it was just, there was never a time when there wasn't a laugh within a few seconds.
Yeah. He's like
so
a freight
good.
train a little bit.
Mhm.
I think that he actually had to figure out how to work in breaks. You know, like when you do high intensity interval training, they have recovery moves. He had to figure out how to place a recovery move, because if he had people laughing from the time he hit the stage, by about 40 minutes, they were exhausted. So
totally
they
get
couldn't,
that.
they'd stop laughing. And he'd go, wait, this is my best stuff. My best stuff's at the end. You go, stop laughing. And he figured out he was wearing them out.
Don't you agree?
Yeah.
I totally think that makes sense.
Yeah. So he had to figure out how to he started like reverse engineering his act and putting his really strong stuff in the front so that everybody could really, really laugh and enjoy the really strong stuff, and then have a little bit of a break and then end strong.
It was fun. I was sitting next to Daryl, who'd never seen Bert's comedy, and then the guy, so his friend, who they didn't really know anything about Bert until that day. And so sitting beside two people who were experiencing him for the first time was hilarious.
I
for me.
bet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
he's
been
not
fun.
he's not a regular comic, I don't think, because he's a storyteller. I mean, he doesn't have any setup punch jokes. They're all like 7, 8, 9, 10,
Yeah.
13-minute jokes. So, and then there's little laugh in between, but it's really hard to wrap your head around, I think. That's why he never did like late night talk shows, because you have 3 minutes.
Oh,
And he's
right.
like, I don't have 3 minutes. My shortest joke is 7 minutes.
Yeah.
interesting.
So I
but
can't
within
do
the
that.
7 minutes, there are so many times that you laugh, but
Yes.
you need it all to make it all hang
Yeah.
together. You do need that. I guess I can see that.
Yeah.
That time. But
So he was always like, I can only do like late night when I can be on the couch and talk to them, because I don't want someone to see half a joke.
right.
Right.
And that's not going to get them to my show. And that's the purpose, right, of doing late night talk show, is to promote something that you're trying to,
Right.
promote. So, well, I'm glad you guys came. Thank you for coming.
Thank you
for
so
having
much.
us.
It was
So
so
fun.
fun.
It was a fun night. It was really fun.
It really was.
It was a really fun night. I have this I have a bitch bone in my body, one or two, and someone as a gift, we gave tickets to someone as a gift, and they gave me I think it was like a 20-year-old bottle of Rothschild red wine in the green room in a box, like a gift, clearly a gift. And someone came in the green room and opened it and drank it. And I was so mad.
Oh.
I was so mad.
Seriously?
And I saw who was drinking it, and I did not know who they were. And I was like, who the fuck opened my gift and drank my 20-year-old wine? They drank almost half of it. So I, of course, snatch it, go to the next green room next door, pour 4 teeny tiny shot glasses for me and 3 of my girlfriends so we can taste it. And then I go back in the other room, and I was talking to his manager, and I was like, who is this fucking guy that opened my gift? It was gift wrapped in a wine box.
Yes,
And he
uh-huh.
opened it, had a bow on top. Come on, who does that? And
Was
she
it
goes,
was it a celebrity?
no, she said, that's the guy who just bought the Machine movie. And I went, oh, okay, he can have the wine. I'm such an asshole. Oh, sorry. My bad. Never mind. I'll buy you another bottle too.
There
You want
had
that?
to be
He-
someone who was super entitled.
Yeah, he was like, that's the guy from Legendary who just bought the Machine story to make into a movie. And I went, okay, he can have the wine. Sorry that I snatched the bottle and got my 4 little
Did
bitty
you
drips
take
out
it
of
out
it.
of his hands?
Almost. It was
Oh,
pretty
that's
close.
fantastic.
I literally walked, they were sitting around a coffee table, and I literally walked in front of him and took it off the table and walked in the next room. I was like, maybe not one of my best moments.
No,
Maybe
that
not one
was
of
a
my best
good
moments.
move.
But I didn't know who they were. I mean,
No.
and I said to the guy, I was like, oh, they opened the wine. And he goes, yeah, it's a really nice wine. I said, yeah, I know. I got it for a gift tonight. And he went, lucky you. And I was like, fucking asshole, that's my wine. So I took it. And it was the guy who bought the baby. My bad. Oh, well.
I think you deserved it.
Yeah. Anyway, funny story from the Burt Show. What are we talking about today? I've forgotten. We've had so much conversation before this.
I know. We are talking about discipline. And we get a lot of questions about this, about like, how do I discipline this situation?
Yeah.
I would like to start with a disclaimer, though, because I think that there's such a difference of discipline before children are rational and logical. So I would say I would rather talk about discipline when your kids start to be maybe 8, 9, 10. The younger thing is a whole different beast.
It is. Now, why, how do you, do we want to just leave that out entirely, or do we want to address it in like age group, rough age group sections? Do you know what I mean?
I just find that there are experts in that younger thing. I read so many books. I'm just so far from that in my life. My youngest is in high school.
Right.
That we did a workshop recently, and a lot of the parents wanted to mostly focus on that because their kids were young. Mm-hmm. And it's just not my comfort zone.
Right.
I'm just far away from it. So I mean, we can do it, but I feel like I'm more comfortable when you get rational human beings,
right?
Not where there's so much about that young stuff where you have to. You remember the whole parenting with love and logic? You had to be 3 steps ahead. You had to outline the 3 choices, but they're all okay with you. Point is, it's so hard as a parent to always be that far ahead of your kids that the consequences make sense, and it's just exhausting. And I think
well, here's one thing I'll say about that age, not to not address it at all, because a lot of people listening have kids that are younger than 8. I always felt like my point of view was, who is this child and what does this child need to learn?
Yes.
And what is the purpose of their poor behavior choice at the moment? Mm-hmm. Like Isla was a hitter and a thrower. Well, I understood that was because she couldn't articulate her feelings. So then my job as a parent was to say, are you feeling frustrated because the elephant is not mooing? Are you feeling angry because the elephant doesn't roll? Are you I would try to give her words. And even though she still didn't get it, it would calm her down. And to think that at that age, they're really not malicious humans. They're not meanly focused on trying to do something wrong. So discipline to me is difficult in that age. It's really about understanding, in my opinion, it's about understanding who the kid is and what they need to learn, as opposed to punishing them for something they do wrong. You know?
It's a great way to look at it.
I do. And I just had somebody ask me, how do I stop an 18-month-old from hitting? And I was
don't.
I was like, well, I mean, why are they hitting? Like, you have to figure that out. And that can be really difficult to figure out.
Yes.
You sometimes don't ever figure that out. They just eventually outgrow it. And you're like, thank God that's over.
Well, I don't know that they outgrow it unless it is, because with Isla, with the hitting, I would say, we don't hit in our house. We use words. I said that from the time she was hitting until she was 4. Yeah. It took that long for her to understand, oh, I'm supposed to say, you make me angry, instead of hitting my sister. Oh, I get it. It literally took that long. My mother-in-law, who is an early childhood brain development expert, kept saying, repeat, repeat, repeat. Know your values, know your rules in your house, and repeat, repeat, repeat.
Yes.
And eventually they'll get it. But I think if you don't do that, if you don't set the foundation of, these are the rules of our house, repeat, 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 or some variation of that, then when you get to 8, you may be off in a ditch because you don't have that foundation, because it really starts, to me, when they show up. Obviously, there's no discipline to be had the first probably 12 months of their life. But once Isla started hitting, I had to address that. There was another child in my house who didn't deserve to be hit.
Right.
So the repeat I really felt like it wasn't discipline at that age. It was teaching and guiding.
Because I feel like the better word is consequence. There's a consequence. Right. There's a natural consequence of that action. So if you're going to hit your sister, you're going to be removed. And luckily, they're small enough when you can win at that age and put them wherever it is that they can't hit someone. That's a natural consequence more than a discipline.
Right. Exactly. So then they learn, you choose the behavior. This was my moniker. You choose the behavior, you choose the consequence. If you choose to hit your sister, you choose to lose the privilege of this toy. Your choice. So you hit her, toy's gone. But you chose that. I didn't discipline you. You chose the consequence. That's the way I parented my kids for a long time. That you choose the behavior, you choose the consequence.
I love that. And I mean, it still applies now, I think.
Applies 100% now.
But people have a hard time being consistent. So what is that? People have a hard time following through on whatever they decide the consequence is going to be. Because I think this is where it gets tricky, because let's say you're trying to leave the house and the normal consequence for hitting your sister would be to have to go to your room for a few minutes, but you have to get out the door.
Yeah.
So what do you do there? It's hard to always think on your toes.
Yes.
So a lot of times the consequence just gets thrown away, and that can become habit for people where they just don't follow through on what they say.
Right.
And that's the most important thing, is that the kids believe that you're going to do something about it.
That's right. The consistency, and always, it's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
It's I have a puppy, and I said to Bert, this is my last puppy, because I feel like I have a toddler. Because it's just, let's go pee-pee outside. Let's go pee-pee outside. Good job, pee-pee outside. Let's go pee-pee outside. Let's go pee-pee outside. Oh, good job, pee-pee outside. Let's go pee-pee. That's like all day, every day. I'm just inspiring the dog to pee outside. And every once in a while she goes, yeah, I'm just going to pee right here. And you're like, no, I've just spent 2 days with saying pee-pee outside, pee-pee outside. Are you fucking kidding me? But everything I read about potty training a dog is you can't stop. You have to be consistent. The minute they have an accident, it takes you 3 or 4 times to get back on track. So it's the same thing with a kid.
Yeah.
It's really not brain surgery to me. It's that you're consistent. I think people get exhausted.
I do too.
And I think there are behaviors that have to be stopped immediately for safety issues.
Yes.
But most of them are, I think most of the time, especially in those ages, it is repetition. It is,
right.
Do I have the patience to continue to be consistent? Sometimes for years on things. Sometimes it is years.
Yeah.
And their brains just haven't developed. They have to hear it enough times. And and you get tired of hearing yourself.
But the other thing is to look for the payoff. So sometimes parents accidentally pay off bad behavior with something good. The most obvious one is just attention.
Right.
But if that's the best way to really get your parents' attention is by causing a ruckus, it's going to be something that the kid's now being positively reinforced to do, right? Keep causing trouble because now you're going to get all this attention, even if it's negative. I mean, that's the most basic one, but it's an interesting thing to look for the payoff in whatever your kid's doing.
That is interesting, especially when they're that young. A tantrum comes to mind. If a tantrum happens and mommy runs to the rescue, well, that tantrum's just going to keep happening.
Or you get something to be quiet. Maybe you get something that this will keep you quiet, but it's really a toy. It's a bonus.
Right. A treat or something. Yeah, that's really true. I didn't
cookies.
do
I mean,
that.
people did it with cookies. I couldn't believe that. Just watching people, like, their kids cry and they start handing them cookies. I'm like, I don't think you should be doing that. That seems like a bad idea.
We were sitting in a restaurant the other night, and my 17-year-old sitting beside me, and the table just to the right of us was this sweet-looking couple, and they had a boy who was probably 5 and a boy who was maybe 7. Maybe the 5-year-old was a little bit younger. Maybe he was 4. But it was so great. My son turned to me and he was like, check this out, Mom. And the 5-year-old, quietly but really dramatically, something was going on. He was like pulling his hair, but he wasn't making noise, but he was really upset. And the parents were just continuing to have their conversation. They were not giving him the time of day because clearly he was about to have a tantrum, and they were just doing that thing where when you can talk to us normally, we will give you some attention. But right now, we're going to drink our wine. It was just so fun to watch.
Awesome.
It was fantastic. And from the side, he was just contorting everything. And they were just not gonna
address
play.
it. Right.
I think that continues too. Like, you really see the evidence of it when they're 4 and 5, but that happens when they're 14 too. Right. So much where if you as a parent can continue on unaffected, seemingly unaffected, that's such a powerful statement to your kid. Like, your behavior does not define who I am.
It's so hard to do, though.
It's so hard to do.
It's so hard to do, especially when they're little and you'll have this moment with them where you say, you know, we don't hit in our family. There's no hitting. And they turn around and hit. You go, no hitting in our family. There's no hitting. We're going to take a moment and we're going to sit down and be quiet for a moment. Hit. You know, that's
Right.
the way it happened in my house. I kept going, the elevator's not going to the top floor here. On this one issue, the elevator's stopping like at the arm because it keeps hitting. So patience, I think, in parenting, which is so hard because you're so tired when they're younger.
And it's loud.
And it's
they're loud, and it's just hard at those ages. It's overload. I think it's sensory overload to be a parent when your kids are being whiny and loud and banging stuff or dropping things. It's just hard.
And dirty.
And
You know, everything's so dirty and there's nothing you do to keep it clean.
Right.
You just can't. It's just all over them all the time. And
the truth is, even though I say, like, if you can just act like, oh, it's not affecting me, it does affect you.
Yeah,
it does say,
it
like,
does.
you do start going, am I messing up? What am I getting wrong here? Why
I
is my
found
kid
about
acting this way?
myself personally is noise pollution really bothers me.
Yes.
I don't know what that is, but just a personal thing. If someone's in another room in my house repetitively banging something or doing something, it really bothers me.
I am the exact
And
same
kids,
way.
I don't think they hear that sometimes.
no, they don't hear it. I don't hear, that doesn't bother me. I don't have that. You know, one thing that I did with Isla when Georgia was so easy to parent in those years. She just wanted to snuggle and read books and play quietly. She was the easiest child. And the Tasmanian devil came 2 years later and schooled me about all things patience. And she
and you
was
probably thought
really
you were the
hard.
best parent with Georgia. You were
I was
I
like,
have
this is a
locked
breeze.
in.
Come talk to me. I know what's going on here.
I always see it with people with like one child who's amazingly well behaved, and they're like, how the hell are you letting your kid get away with this? And I'm like, oh, you just have
Just
one.
wait.
You just have one, right? Yeah. Well, Isla showed up literally as the Tasmanian devil. And at one day, I had more than I could take. And I put her in her room and closed the door and went in the toilet and took the lid off the toilet tank and broke it over the toilet. And I was like, I feel much better. Now
Was
I
this
can go
a
back in.
premeditated thing, or you just walked in there and you just knew that would feel really good?
Yeah, I went, I need release,
Right.
or I'm going to throw her across the room. So I need some release. A toilet lid I can replace, no problem. So I just picked it up and broke it over the top of the toilet, over the seat.
Yeah.
And then I closed the door to the bathroom because it was unsafe. We had 2 bathrooms and went back in there and parented. And I felt so much better. Now, maybe that's not a healthy choice for me, but I didn't do it in front of my kids.
Right.
And I needed I was so frustrated with my inability to affect change in this child in this moment, probably after weeks of trying, that I needed something. So having those, I'm going to lose it feelings when you're parenting with discipline in those age, I think is really normal.
Yes.
As long as you find somewhere healthy to place it.
It's interesting. I never thought about it this way till I heard you say that just then. One of the things that's so empowering to realize is that whenever we need someone else to change in order to feel better, we're in a losing position. We've given away our power. But as parents, you're in that position for a period of years, really, where it's just not really going to be okay for your kid to just be a disaster in front of you. It's hard to feel good when your kid's spinning out of control. So it's a tough, those years, it's just hard because that dynamic is flawed to have to be in a position where you need someone else to be different.
Yes.
In order to feel okay.
I think you're right. And, in those years, my focus was I'm winning every argument.
Too. You have to win as a parent. You have to win.
If I lose one argument, I've lost the war.
Yeah.
I'm winning everything, even to the point where, again, Isla Kreischer climbed out of her crib at 18 months old. We lived in a 2-bedroom. So then and we had a loft. So her crib was in the loft with us. She could use her toes and shinny over a baby gate at 18 months old. So I had no safe way of leaving her in her crib unless I sat in front of the crib and made sure she didn't get out of it. So I was like, okay, 18 months, we're going in the bedroom with Georgia. This was awful. I would put her to bed every night at 7, and she would get up and walk into the living room, big old fat grin on her face like, what's up, people? For 3.5 hours, 7 days.
How long did it last?
3 months.
3.5 hours, you'd have to keep putting her back in there?
Back in, back in, back in, back in. I didn't know what else to do.
I got one of those spinny things that you put on the door that the doorknob wouldn't open.
But then she's in the room with Georgia. Now screaming.
Oh, Georgia's
with
in there.
Georgia.
Georgia's in there
so
too.
So I have another child.
Right.
I don't know where to put.
Right.
Do I move Georgia to my bedroom?
Right.
Is Georgia in bed with me? I had
Yeah.
limited options. 3 months I walked that bitch to bed. 3 fucking months I walked that bitch to bed.
For 3.5
I would start
hours.
crying at 6 p.m. I'd start crying while I'm like cutting carrots for dinner. I'd go,
PTSD.
You know, I have to tell
7
you.
o'clock's coming. 7 o'clock's coming. Ah! And I'm by myself because Bert's on the road. It was horrible. But I thought to myself, if she wins this battle, she's won the fucking war. And motherfucker, you have never met anybody like me. You're not winning this war.
Right.
She almost killed me. Those 3 months.
I have to say this sleep bullshit where like people are like, my kid slept through the night at 6 weeks old. I'm like,
lucky you.
Yeah, go screw yourself. Stop talking about it because the rest of us are in hell.
Yeah, brag about it.
Awful.
I didn't sleep through the night until she was 4.5. 4.5.
Junie was the exact same way. It's awful.
That
She would go to bed, but then she would wake up every single night, multiple times.
Yeah.
Until 4.5, 5.
Yeah, I was 4.5. She'd wake up at 2:30 and just go in the living room, start playing.
See, I had the opposite. I had my first one was very difficult, and then my youngest one, who was 2.5 years later, was a piece of cake. And I was like, if I had known that some children could be this easy, I would have had so many more.
Oh, I think the good Lord did the old bait and switch for me because he gave me the easy one. If I'd had Isla first,
no more.
Only child.
We wanted to have 3. And Isla came and I went, someone will die. One of the 3 will be dead. I'm spending all day keeping this one alive. Like she's climbing everything. She started jumping off the corner of the couch at like 11 months old. Just jumping, like trusting the universe would catch her. I have no idea. She was hard to parent. But yeah, that perseverance, I think understanding what you need in your household, your basic value system, and saying we don't hit, we don't throw tantrums, we don't whatever they are, and sticking to your guns for me was my plan of attack for parenting that pre-8-year-old, you know?
And the thing that I think is the time when it switches is I feel like you do have to win when they're young.
Yeah.
You have to be the force in their life that sets the boundaries.
Yes, I agree.
And then it switches
guess.
where it's the winning, I think, that switches. And I never thought about this way before either. But then it becomes, we always talk about transferring as much responsibility to the kid as early and often as possible, which obviously for baby things you start with and then bigger and bigger, but so that they can start taking some responsibility for their own decisions. So then I think it switches to this transition period where, so first the parent's winning, then there's a transition period when it's going to go back and forth. And then the kid, there has to be a handoff.
Yeah.
Where it's not about you winning anymore. It's about you've done a good enough job that your kid can take responsibility mostly for themselves.
Right.
So that's an interesting way to look at it.
It
That
is.
winning thing. When do you stop
Winning.
having to be the controller and saying, well, okay, what's your way?
Because I think that need to win when that is no longer necessary is the biggest cause of problems between parent and kid.
Yeah,
100%.
So much. Older kids,
100%.
Right.
Because then it just comes out as control.
As a war.
And that I love also thinking about it in terms of subtext, where the parent means something, but the kid hears the subtext. The parent means, I'm trying to keep you safe is why I'm saying no. And the kid hears, you don't trust me? Or the kid thinks, they hear, I don't trust you. So they think, you don't trust me. The subtext is, I'm not able to make some decisions for myself.
Right,
You
that
think I'm
makes
not.
sense.
It's just like, I was thinking of it with the college admission scandal because they were talking again about Felicity Huffman's daughter
Mhm.
when she just got sentenced. And one of the quotes they were saying from her is, why didn't you think I could do this on my own? Why didn't you
Right.
think I was smart enough to be able to do this without you meddling?
Right.
It's that subtext of what are your kids hearing when you're trying to help?
Right. And we don't think about that. We think about our good intentions, right? It's my good intention to keep you safe.
Right.
That's my job as a parent. But I don't necessarily, I know in the past, I didn't necessarily think about how it was received.
Right.
Only my intention and my delivery, which would be good and appropriate. But if they're hearing, oh, well, I can't do this myself, that's destructive. Right?
And I think there's a time when the main role of the parent is to keep you safe, because kids really won't keep themselves safe at those younger ages. But then if you switch and think about it as my primary role as your parent is to give you the tools you need so that you can trust yourself and keep yourself safe and make good decisions that get you towards where you want to go with your life. That's a whole different way of thinking about parenting.
Yes, it's very sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
Very sophisticated way of approaching parenting. And, I think that transitional period is different for every kid.
Absolutely.
Sure, yep.
And that's where I was listening to some of our podcasts recently, the ones we've done together. And so many times we come back to just being curious. And you even started this one saying, being curious about what did it mean that she was hitting?
Right.
And I think that's the thing. If you can bring the curiosity to it and not have to know everything, but just realize somehow we're going to start changing this dance we're doing where I'm not just the boss of you.
Right.
I'm going to give you some chances to show me that maybe you can make some good decisions for yourself.
Right.
But just be curious about, is this one of those? Nope, you screwed that one up. Is this one of those? Oh, good job on that one.
Yes. The curiosity is key. Georgia, at least with school, became independent very early. Like kindergarten, super excited to do homework, came home, did her homework, no problem. Never had to help her. I'd help her if she didn't understand something, but I never had to keep her on track. Isla, that has just happened. I am not joking, this April. And she's 7th grade in April. Until then, she had this sounds bad. She had the ability for her in her type of thinking to keep herself on track with schoolwork was very difficult. So she would ask for my help.
That's what I was going to say. Did she ask?
Yes, and she resented it because her friends don't need it. I think, but she had such a hard time keeping herself organized and on track. It's just not the way her brain works. She's she's an artist brain. She doesn't have that kind of, I'm going to be this taskmaster like her sister. And I think to live with someone who is a taskmaster and not be one yourself is also frustrating. So just last April was the first time I felt I was really able to just let her have it. And I tried on and off since 4th grade to kind of let her dip her big toe in. And it was always an insurmountable mountain to recover from once she, said, hey, Mom, I need help. So I was like, well, there's no need for you to suffer through all this. Right. Let me help you until your own personal growth and development is in a place where you can take this off my hands. But there's a lot of times where I questioned that, where I thought, am I enabling her to stay dependent on me? And now that she's so much more, I don't help her with homework hardly ever now. I mean, for years I've been saying, you go do your math worksheet and I will check it. And if there's errors, we'll go over what the errors are. 40 minutes, she'd be in her room just kind of like staring off into space, like not knowing what to do. And I go, how's it going? How's math going? I'm on number 2. And I'm like, it's been 40 minutes. You don't need to spend this much time on math. Like, this isn't working for you. Like, you need to sit down and do this sheet so that you have time in your day. This is why you hate homework, because you can't stay focused on it. And she doesn't have ADHD or anything like that. I think she just gets overwhelmed. Her system's kind of like shut down. And now all of a sudden, she's going in her room. She's doing her whole worksheet. She's bringing it to me. I'm checking it. We go over her errors and we move on. But I've been trying to get her to that place since 4th grade. I mean, that was a long time for us to get her to this place. So it's been a difficult decision to go, do I just let her abjectly fail and feel terrible about herself? Because I know she can do the work. But as her IEP teachers say, she just needs shoring up.
And what would she say about it, looking back on it, how that process was of you helping her and getting her to this point?
She would always say that she didn't need as much help as I thought she needed. And I'd always think, really? How much of that homework did you actually turn in? How much of that project did you actually do? Really? So I don't know. I'm sure her perspective was mixed compared to what I thought it was.
That's a really good one for her, though, now that she's on the other side of that, to put in her resilience. It's like a quiver in her resilience bag, because that's a huge thing that she got from there to there.
Right.
And to know that she can do that, because she'll probably come up against something else in her life where she's not where she wants to be. And to realize something as miserable as homework, she was able to figure out a process for herself.
Right. You know what helped her more than anything this year, which I thought was really fascinating because I never would have thought of doing this. She asked me to print her weekly calendar, which is so massive. It's like piano one day, tennis on Saturday. There's like 4 things on her calendar. But she needed to conceptualize her week so that she could see how much free time she had. She wanted to like almost touch her free time, because in her perception, her whole day was homework, which she would make her whole day homework because she would drag it out all day long.
And if it feels it's weighted that big because the negative emotions around it are that big, they take up more space than just the time.
Yeah, than just the time. That's right. It took up so much of her being that when every Sunday, I print her week's calendar out and put it on her wall, and she goes and looks at it and goes, okay, good. Okay, good. She comes home and bangs her homework out. I don't know what, I would never have come up with that. I have no idea where she knew she needed to see her free time, but I didn't think of it like that. So
cool.
It's really cool that she was able to help her in that way, because it has shifted her focus entirely on her homework.
I think one of the things that's coming up for me right now is that just staying in conversation with her about this, as opposed to just going, you need to get your goddamn homework done. Like you're going to get it done, opens up so many opportunities, I guess. And what I was thinking about is that we were just talking about, I think it's called, oh, okay. I'll talk to you about it. We're talking about, there's a law, I think it's called Parkinson's law, but that also sounds wrong because of Parkinson's disease. But it's that the amount of time that you have to do something is the amount of time that it will take. Right? So I just had that conversation with Junie about homework, about, this will take you 10 minutes if you have 10 minutes to do it. It will take you an hour if you have an hour to do it. So
That's one of the things I think you are so good about as a writer, because I feel like you've told me this, I guess, that you'll give yourself a certain amount of time to do something and force yourself, even if you know it's going to be bad, force yourself to just do that draft of it, which I think I need to learn that, because it's such a helpful way to approach things. Just take a first pass, but make yourself do it fast. And then, now it's just editing.
Yeah. Is everything okay?
Everything's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
It was for something else, but sorry. Georgia's high school never calls. So I thought maybe it was something wrong with Georgia. So no, but everything's good. So sorry. What were you saying? You take the first pass?
There's a law that in my head right now, it's called Parkinson's law, but it is. It's called Parkinson's law. And it's that the amount of time that you give yourself to do something is the amount of time that it will take. So if you give yourself, like my daughter will have a homework assignment that I'm like, this will take you 10 minutes. But if she has an hour to do it, she'll sit there and it'll take her an hour to do it.
Right.
So like just having that conversation of look for 10-minute blocks, because you'll get it done so much faster.
Right.
It was
That's
a little bit
actually
of an aside.
the 10-minute block thing. This is going down a total tangent, but it's interesting because we're talking about kids. But there was a book that I can't remember what the name of it was, but this guy interviewed people who had really, really high GPAs in high school and college. And it was, what were the study habits, or what did they do to do that? And it was the little blocks.
Yep.
It was making yourself parse out the homework that you had into little 10-minute blocks throughout the day, instead of keeping it all bunched together so that you have this 5 or 8 or whatever hour block.
Right.
I still can't get my kids to do it, but I think it is such a powerful thing, because all of a sudden you're chipping away at it. And 10 minutes of homework, well, anyone can do 10 minutes of homework.
Totally.
But all of a sudden, by the time you're in college and you're 400 pages behind in reading and you got to go spend 2 days in the library. It's just daunting.
Yeah.
And then you have that 5 or 8 hour block. I mean, most of us can find 10 minutes here. Many times throughout the day, you've got 10 minutes where you're just like, got 10 minutes. I'm just going to sit here. When you use that, then you've got that 5 or 8 hours to sleep. That's what I would do with that, is sleep.
Right. Totally.
So.
We've totally gotten off of discipline.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you why I wanted to talk about the discipline thing. Because did we talk about it before? I don't think we did. The woman who we answered about her daughter, she busted her daughter smoking pot.
Okay.
And I think it was in the bathroom at school.
Yeah. You tell the story of what, I can't remember what exactly happened.
So yeah, I think that her daughter was, I'm going to say 16. She got caught smoking pot at school.
I feel like she was 8th grade. Did I make that up?
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't
it doesn't
know.
matter.
But she got caught. I think she was older. Okay. But she got caught smoking pot in the bathroom at school, and her mom made her do a PowerPoint presentation on the dangers of smoking weed, and she took her daughter's door off the hinges, which we both love this. And so she just, sent us a message saying, "What do you think about this?"
Right.
And the response was, this is what I think is so interesting about getting these questions, is because it's not my kid, there's no agenda with me whatsoever, right? Like I don't want this child to be smoking pot in the bathroom at school,
right?
But I'm not personally feeling like responsible for it or, any of these things. So what my response is total fascination. Like, tell me more, like, what are all of these other variables I don't know the answer to, because we don't know. I don't know why the child is smoking or what to do without knowing all of that information.
Right. So she was asking, how do you feel about us taking the door off? Which in general, I think if your child has done something, that the natural consequence would be to lose the privilege of privacy.
Right.
It's great. Take the door off.
Totally.
But we did not have any information about what is the meaning of this girl smoking pot and at school. So is she anxious? Is she actually self-medicating because she's anxious or depressed about something?
Right.
Is she trying to fit in? Is it peer pressure? Is she just being defiant? Is it a call for help? Is she trying to get kicked out of school?
Is she bored?
We don't know. Is she bored? So there would be a different consequence for each of those.
Right.
So there isn't just a blanket, take the door off.
Right.
That may have been the perfect thing, but how do you know? Because again, you're about to the age where pretty soon that girl's going to be on her own to start making decisions about when to smoke pot and where and beyond, so you want to get to the root of, while you still got him in your home, what's really going on with you? Do you just really think pot's a good thing and that's the path you want to take? You just want to be a pot smoker? So,
because it could have been that. It could be the kid's like, look, people drinking has way bigger health consequences than smoking pot. And I think my mom's overreacting. That could be the response. And that's a different conversation. It's a wildly different conversation.
So many different. Yeah, you're right. There's so many different reasons and angles and I do think to that parenting.
Like this transition of, at first you need to shut, like when your child is 2 years old and you have another kid, and I had a 2-year-old who started hitting and I was pregnant. So it's like, you have to nip that in the bud before the baby comes along, right? And you go through this stage of, I have to win, and I have to shut down the behavior. And that's what matters, to, okay, now I have to have real conversations with my kids, a lot of real conversations, because I can't shut down the behavior. Like you really can't stop your kid from smoking pot if they're going to smoke pot.
Right.
Well, and those are the hardest conversations to have, because you as the parent have to be secure in your own beliefs and values, your own reasonings for things. And a lot of people, that's hard to look at.
It is hard to look at. And it's hard to realize that your kids' values may not be the same as yours.
That's right.
And when they get to be a teenager, that's when they get to start figuring out their own value system.
That's exactly right.
I am extremely spiritual. And my oldest daughter is not so sure about this whole spiritual thing. And I have to respect that in her and not expect her. Now, there are a lot of households that say we all go to church. That's the way it works. That's the value system. Everybody goes to church. When you move out of my house, you don't go to church. That's your choice. Or maybe they don't say that. But that's not how I try to run my house. There's, to each his own. Everybody has their own value system. But it is something that I'm starting to bump up against, is that she She and I have very different points of view where spirituality is concerned. And I'm not going to force her to have mine.
But you can give information.
Yes.
So that's one of the things I think it shifts from having to win to thinking of ourselves as, well, I'm going to give you all the information that informs my values and the decisions that I make and the way I live my life, because you're not going to know unless I tell you. And then I guess if you feel like you've done the best you can in terms of giving information, like, why do you have the spiritual beliefs you have? There's probably 40 million fantastic conversations about that. And then you've tried, and she gets to make her own choice.
Yeah. I think that's hard as a parent.
Yeah. But I would argue that when you allow for that kind of back and forth and conversation, you as a parent have a better chance of having a child who follows your values.
Totally.
Probably. And the thing is too that we forget, they pass through our lives. They are not our possessions.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And the purpose of a good parent is to have them pass through, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not supposed to possess them their whole life. You're supposed to, at a certain point, they start separating, and that's good.
But that's the thing that hurts people, I think, because ultimately it's the kid's choice to stay close to you.
Yes,
and
that's right.
You watch parents try to hold on, and the tighter you hold on, the more your kid is going to push away.
Yeah.
And the more you give them information and freedom and responsibility and boundaries where there need to be, and then your kids can see how you think and they can respect the way you think and not always agree, then they'll choose to stay close to you. But it's that paradox that's really hard. It is true. The tighter you hold on, the more they are going to want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because, in those teenage years, what they want is autonomy, I think. I think they want to do everything themselves, even though they know in their subconscious mind and some in their conscious mind, they really can't. Like, they can't pay the rent. They can't, they're not going to cook their own food every single meal. They are capable, but it's really not the way things work, especially my kids can't drive. Georgia wants to be super independent. She can't drive. So she still relies on me to get her from A to B. But what she wants is that autonomy. So to find ways where they can have it.
Yes.
And then, because there's plenty of ways where they just can't have it.
Right.
And then they'll get more when they start driving, and ways they can have even more, and know that that's the natural progression. We're still not talking about discipline. We're still not talking about
but
discipline.
it is, though, because it started with the taking the door off, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think it is because talking about the pot conversation is an obvious one about discipline. And what do you do? And I think the thing that makes it so hard is because the older our kids get, the better our arguments for the way we think have to be.
It's
and
true.
I think not everyone feels confident in their ability to win by presenting a good argument versus just because I said so.
Right. That's right.
Yep. And I also think that giving them autonomy in the areas where you can give them autonomy is important in discipline, because it helps you say no when you need to say no.
Right.
If you're not always saying no about everything.
Right.
If you're giving them the freedom.
Right.
Like my 10-year-old we're really talking about, can she ride her bike to her friend's house who lives very close, but there's a busy intersection there. Nobody in LA sends their 10-year-old off on a bike, but maybe we should. Maybe I should say, this is something where I can let you do this.
Mm-hmm. Or you do something like this. I'll go with you
to the intersection. Yeah.
Or I'll go with you the first 3 times.
Right, of course. Yes.
And then after that, I'll go with you to the intersection. And then after that, after you get to your friend's house, you text me or whatever, and then you baby step it.
Yes.
I believe in that.
Yeah. And then when it's not always just a rigid, no, I'm not going to give you any responsibility whatsoever, it makes the times when you really have to sit your kids down and go, this is kind of a hard no on this one.
Right.
Because there are those. And we talked about it last time, but I think it is really a good one, is just the idea that sometimes you can ask your kids to have what do they think the discipline should be?
I just
Right.
did this.
Yeah.
I just did this.
It's a good
Yeah.
How did it
thing.
go?
It went really well. I guess, sort of. Georgia, I know we talked about in the past when she got on the public bus without telling us. We were really upset that she just didn't tell us. Well, we had a repeat of that, sort of. She had a typical teenager, really dumb moment, right? Where she had plans with her friend. Mom, can we go to the Burbank Mall? Sure, no problem. And then she says, plans have changed. We're going to go to this restaurant right down the street and just meet for lunch. Great. So as they go meet for lunch, from the restaurant, she texts me, can I walk to my friend's house? Sure. It's a long walk, but yeah, sure. And so I called her and I said, you know what? I think I'm going to pick you up at 3. You have some stuff to do for Girl Scouts before you go on this other thing tonight. So I'm going to pick you up at 3. And she went, oh, I'm on my way to the mall. And I went, wait a minute. You told me that was canceled. Now you're on the way to the mall. I was going to pick you up in 20 minutes, which is the time it would take for you to get to the mall. So now I'm going to drive to the mall and pick you up the minute you get to the mall. This is the same thing as the bus. I just need to know what you're doing. I don't need to know that you've walked from one friend's house to the other across the street, but you're going to a different city.
Right.
You are going to a different city than where we live. This makes things complicated for what I had going on for me, and I'm the person who has to come get you. So your choices have affected my day. And that's not fair. You can't just affect my day without having a conversation with me about it. And this is the same behavior that happened with the bus. I'm really upset. Again, for the same reason. I'll pick you up at the mall. So I go to the mall. I pick her up. She gets in the car and she goes, I'm really sorry, Mom. You're completely right. This was the exact same thing. I don't know why I didn't think to call you. And I promise you I won't do that again. That was really, really bad call. And I went, okay. How do we fix this in the future? Like, if it's happened twice and you really didn't mean for it to happen, then there's something broken in this system. What's broken in the system? I said, I have no interest in being the helicopter mom that follows you on Life 360 and watches where you're all at all moments. I'm not going to do that. So how can we figure out something different? Let's troubleshoot it. This has always happened with the same friend. Is it the friend? Is it the culture in which the friend lives in? Is it once you get there, you forget that you have a responsibility at our house? Are you feeling so comfortable there that you feel like, oh, well, if her mom says it's okay, then it must be okay. And somehow telepathically, I know these things. What's the problem? Where's the issue? Because the issue's not with me. I think what I'm asking is fairly reasonable. I'm asking you to let me know when you go somewhere. That's it. Do you think that's unreasonable? And she said, no, I don't think that's unreasonable at all. And I said, okay, well, then let's figure out why this behavior keeps happening.
What was it?
She doesn't know. I don't know. She said, finally, she said, I think I get swept up in the moment. And then now that I'm in it, I'm in it and I don't think about it. And I was like, okay, well, then how do we mitigate that? How do we stop that?
How do you?
I don't know. I left it to her, actually. And I said to her, if this happens again, we're going to have to figure out a real consequence. Like perhaps you lose your phone for a week, or perhaps you can't hang out with that friend for 2 weeks, or whatever the consequence is, we can figure that out together. But this can't happen again. I was like, I can't have you going to somewhere entirely different when you told me point blank you weren't going.
So you'll know when she's going to be with that friend again.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting beforehand.
Yeah.
If you two can remember to get her to tell you what's she going to do. Because
Right.
I think there's so many times when people have intentions to do things differently, but they don't actualize it into a concrete,
Right.
tangible thing. So Riley just said the other day she needed to remember something. So she wrote it on her hand, and she remembers things when she writes them on her hand. I'm like, is there not a better way than like marring your,
Right,
big
right.
black Sharpie? And I said, you know what I do when I want to remember something is I picture either the person's face or something that I know I'm going to see when I get in that situation again. And then I try to put it in my head that, oh, when I see that, I'm going to think of that. And she said she did that. She said when she saw that teacher, she was like, oh, this is when I've got to remember to get that signature. And who knows? But the point is, try to anchor it into one
Right.
tangible, what is it? When she sees, does she set a reminder on her phone? What is it going to be
Right.
that's different
Right.
in that?
The word go. Let's go.
Yeah.
Oh, I better call my mom. Let's
Exactly.
go to the movies.
That's
Let me call my
good.
mom.
Or the word
Let's go
bus.
to the mall. Right. Or the word bus.
That's really good. Yeah, or bus.
Right.
I mean, the young lady she's hanging out with and her mom are awesome. We've known them forever. They'd never do anything unsafe. But that is the person both times where there was no communication to me about what was going on. Right.
Right.
And so, and it's not the mom's responsibility to say, hey, Georgia, have you called your mom?
Right.
Georgia's old enough now. She
Right.
should be calling her mom. So hopefully I handled that okay. And I expressed myself on the phone and she was able to think about it. and apologize in her own words, as opposed to, I think if it had happened face to face with each other, she probably wouldn't have apologized immediately. She probably would have rebelled a little bit, resisted a little bit, you know.
But that's pretty cool because technically she didn't get a discipline
No,
on
she
that
didn't.
one. And it was a big one.
It was.
But you chose the route of problem solving, giving her
Right.
responsibility for figuring out how to not have that happen and saying how important it is to you and all that stuff.
Right.
Whereas I think other people would have just, this is a second offense, something bad would have happened. You would have lost some privilege.
Right.
I think it's fantastic.
Well, I thought about that. She was supposed to go to horror nights at Universal tonight, and I thought my daddy would have said, "You will not be going to that tonight. This happened again, you're not getting that." But I thought when she sat down and apologized and explained her part so clearly, I thought, okay, she understands, which is my purpose. My purpose is not to punish.
Right.
My purpose is to help her learn. So I feel like she understands this, where she wasn't able to explain it the first offense. But and then I said to her, if this happens again, there will be a consequence. So now that line has been kind of like, okay, you don't get any more free shots now.
Right.
And I think that's why it's so hard to say that there is this one way to handle discipline, because when they're that age, sometimes there are cases where you have to shut it down. Like if I had a kid who was drunk driving, you have to shut that down.
Yeah.
And you have to shut that down almost before you find out why, because the next time they could be dead.
It doesn't matter, yeah.
They could be dead the next time.
Totally.
So there are times when you have to go, you're not leaving the house. And I am winning this in a huge way because this is so inappropriate.
I agree.
But there are other times, and it's really in some ways family specific and value specific, where you can go, okay, I'm just going to get informed on this. I'm going to be curious, and we're going to be in conversation about it.
Right. The flip side about the Halloween horror nights also was, this was a group of girls she's new with. This is a brand new high school. Well, not new from last year, but it's a new school where she's, it's taken her a little time to find her group. She's scared of her own shadow. So for her to go to Halloween horror nights was a big deal for her. To be that kind of brave and that kind of persevere. That's not her wheelhouse all the time. So I didn't want to embarrass her in front of her brand new group of friends and say, now you don't get to persevere over this big thing. So that's really was my choice for not. If she was going to the movies or something with the friend that went to the mall, I would have been like, you're not going.
But don't you think there are people who would have just out of principle?
Yes. Oh, my dad.
And I think that there's so much more value in thinking about it specifically about the specific person and the specific incident. And what you just said here, you would say that to her. So when our kids understand our thinking,
right? Because
I've said that, I can't remember what it was, but recently my son didn't get a consequence. And I was like, you realize you're not technically getting a consequence for this and it's a big deal? He was like, I totally realize it, but this. And because he was on the same page that I was, we had achieved him getting it.
Yeah.
So
why are you punitive?
Right.
Yeah.
What's the point of being punitive?
And I believed him. He cared. He totally got it.
Yeah.
He was remorseful. And
same when she sat down.
Yeah.
I was like, she explained exactly what was going on.
Right.
So then what more do I need? A smackdown?
Right.
For what? For what purpose?
And especially when you already demonstrated, when I say something, I mean it. I think there are some situations where parents have been so permissive and maybe not followed through with their words for so long.
That's a good point.
That now you're in a position where your kids are up against some really big stuff and you've got to show them that you mean what you say. That does happen. But when you're like, my kids know that when it comes down to it, it's getting shut down. So most of the time I can really just have a conversation.
But you bring up a really good point, because if you don't already have the relationship with your kids where it's more transparent and it's more of a partnership, then you can't. Some kids are literally just pushing boundaries just to see what they can get away with. So that's a whole different conversation.
Well, I talk about this a lot with my kids relative to their friends and how their friends are parented, where I say to my kids, rules and boundaries are really healthy. They help you understand that you're loved and cared for, because I care enough to say, you can't hit your sister. That means I care enough about your behavior and about her feelings. So you're learning, oh, okay, my parents care about what's going on. So when some parents don't have consistent boundaries, the child becomes insecure. And then that insecurity comes inconsistent and sometimes really bad behavior that can be destructive for the kid. And so then the kid doesn't know, like if there's no walls to bounce against, they don't know their own limits. So having boundaries is a way of expressing love. Now, being oppressive is not, but saying this is how our life functions. And I try to get my kids involved in those boundaries, like with our chores. Our chores have sucked lately. Like nobody's doing them. And I'm getting frustrated and I'm starting going, why am I the only person doing the chores? There's a chore chart. You have all this autonomy. You can choose whatever you want. You just have to choose 2 and you're still not doing them. What more can I do? I'm saying this out loud to them. What more can I do? And I went, here's what we do. Let's decide on a time of day when everything stops and everyone does their chores. And let's name it a really ridiculous name and have a theme song. And they went, I love it. Let's call it Hammer Time. I was like, Hammer Time. Perfect. So we're going to play Hammer Time. What time of day? 6 p.m. George is almost always home by 6 p.m. from softball. So 6 p.m. is Hammer Time. So we went around the house and set an alarm on all of our Alexa to play MC Hammer Time at 6 p.m. So yesterday was the first day we had Hammer Time. And when that song went off, my 2 kids were like, it's Hammer Time. Let's go do our chores. And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Let's do our chores. They did their chores in like less than 10 minutes. It was less than 10 minutes. And I was like, do you see that this is all we needed?
So good.
For everyone to feel good. So now everyone is achieving. Now I feel supported. Now you've done your chores and it's been fun. That simple shift, I think, is so hard to come up with when you're in the thick of parenting. Because you're like, I just fucking want you to scoop the dog shit. That's what I want. That's what I want. When they were really little and I think in my parenting experience, I have found valve releasers throughout, right? So when they were really little and I was at the end of my rope, I said to them, I will no longer respond to mom. You have to call me Myrtle. If you call me Myrtle, I'll do whatever you want. But mom is dead for like the next hour. And they thought that was the most amazing thing. Hey, Myrtle. Because how can you hear Myrtle and not laugh?
Mm-hmm. You cannot.
So I set myself up to be plummeted into laughing as opposed to being frustrated.
Isn't that funny? Because like when they're babies, you just want them to say mom so badly. And then there comes a time where you're like, if I hear mama one more time.
But then there comes a time when you want them to say it again because they go away.
I know. I do know that.
I'd take Myrtle too, though, because there's a lot of great memories with Myrtle.
Great.
That's fantastic.
But with the discipline too, I think there are times when you have a choice. I could have chosen to have punished my kids for not doing their chores. Yeah. But instead I went, this system is not working. So the system, there's a systemic problem here.
That's such a good way to look at it.
My kids are not bad kids. They're not, well, they may be a little lazy, but I don't think they're any lazier than anybody else their own age. But how do I teach them how to inspire themselves? Because when they're an adult, they're going to have to do all this shit by themselves.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so great what you taught. And it reminds me, since you have a puppy, of you never call a dog to punishment.
No.
Right? It's
no.
Like the system, you got to think for your kids, you're going to punish them into chores. I mean, it is
right.
It was so much smarter how you thought of it.
So then the negative connotations there's a negative connotation attached to chores.
Right.
When chores are a fact of life. Like when I'm doing my chores, I put music on every Alexa and I enjoy myself.
And you feel good after.
Right?
Yeah.
What's that?
You feel good after.
Totally.
Yeah.
I feel uplifted. My house is clean. And I've spent an hour or whatever it took me listening to like Queen. Love it.
Every time you say Alexa, it goes on back there. Uh-huh.
Oh,
yeah.
I know. I'm
She's
thinking
my
about
love.
ordering some things.
But anyway, so discipline, I know I was brought up with discipline being punitive.
Mm-hmm.
But discipline, the actual word, I don't think means that,
Mm-hmm.
right? It means, I don't even know what it means. Hey, Alexa, what's the definition of the word? What word am I looking for?
What word was
Discipline.
I just had a brain fart. The word discipline.
As a noun, discipline is usually defined as a branch of knowledge or, alternatively, a system of rules of conduct or method of practice. As a verb, discipline can mean develop, a child's or animal's, behavior by instruction and practice, especially to teach self-control.
So none of that is punitive.
Right.
But we grew up, or I grew up, with discipline being punitive, right? Discipline to me means being able to stay on task, you know, to be able to stay focused on what's at hand. If that's a rule, if that's a value, or if that's your homework, that all takes discipline. Working out every day takes discipline. So I don't know.
I think it's punitive and then it's fear-based. Like, how many times do you hear parents go, my kids are scared of me?
Right.
And I mean, there are certain things where I think my kids are like, I better do that because, you know, but as a general rule of thumb, I would hope that my kids aren't scared of me, especially when it comes to the big things.
Right.
When it comes to the big things, I want them to be able to come to me.
Right. I do too. My kids are scared of me in some situations. They say I yell at them all the time, you know, and I don't yell all the time. I'm just a very passionate. I just talk like this and they think this is yelling. And I'm like, I'm not yelling. You'll know when I'm yelling. But I think until they were mature enough to understand that's how mom talks, it did scare them. And that's my mistake. Like, I should have figured that out earlier and said, okay, I can't lean on the excuse that I'm a passionate talker because like we were talking earlier, the effect is not what I'm intending it to be. I'm intending them to understand this is important, and they're hearing mom's yelling at me. So then I'm not getting the effect that I'm looking for by just being passionate, you know?
Right.
And that's reminding me of something I wanted to say a little bit earlier is I think talking about parenting, what your parenting philosophy and style is with your kids is super powerful when they start to go to other people's houses because they can notice. My kids will notice to me that mom is just so up in his grill about everything and it's so annoying. Thanks for not doing that, Mom.
Right.
But I think, again, just being transparent about it. And especially when you, like you said, you're going to send your kid to someone else's home and great mom, but different. And what does it mean? The kids don't always know what it means that those parents are so different about. Maybe their yelling isn't anger either, but maybe that it's just an interesting thing to talk about. Is like, how do your friends' parents treat you guys and those kids? And what is it about that you think I could learn from? And what do you appreciate more about how I do it?
That's a really great idea. I know that the same friend that Georgia was hanging out with, her mom was going to send a bunch of girls on bikes up canyon, like 4 blocks way up canyon to pick up something from her. And Bert was like, absolutely not.
There aren't shoulders there, are there?
Absolutely. There's a bike lane, but it's
there
a
is, but
really
it's still
busy street. And Bert was like, no, different parenting. I will drive you to pick up whatever this mom needs, but you are not riding your bike up this really busy street. And we actually had a conversation with Georgia about it and about that incident. And we were saying, think about what your family limitations would be on something like that with safety. So, and then maybe you can have a conversation with your friend. I'm not sure that's a great idea. No, that's hard to do when you're a teenager and there are
Really
other
hard.
teenagers. But think about it, because especially something like Bert did this. Bert parlayed it into drunk driving. What if you go to someone's house and their parents buy beer and then their parents know you're going to drive home? What do you do?
Or what if the parents drunk?
What if the parents are drinking?
Yes. What do you do?
Right.
It's just all an opportunity for a conversation.
This, I think, is so good too, in terms of before the situation happens that you have to discipline them. Give them a chance to talk to you about what they're going to do. Like we've talked about this, what are you going to do if you're at a party and everybody's drinking and it gets out of control? What do you what are all of these situations that are common? They're common for children to be in. Talk about it ahead of time.
Right.
So they have a chance to like visualize it in their head, and you can go over, like, this came up because there was there was a football player who was, if I remember the story correctly, he was at a college. He was too young. He was on scholarship and he was at a party where people were drinking and he was drinking, and somebody started acting really inappropriately, like really sexually aggressive with a woman who was there. And he stepped in and called the police. And people were very, he could have lost his college scholarship, all of these things. And those things happen. They happen all of the time when kids are in a position where they have to make that choice. Like, what the hell are you going to do when your friend's parents say get in the car and they've been drinking?
Right.
Like, what the hell are you going to do?
Right.
If you haven't had a chance to play that over in your mind, you very well might just get in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have had those conversations with our kids. What if someone offers you a drink? What if, if you're at a party, don't ever put your drink down and then pick it up and drink it later because someone may have put something in it. This is a reality of life. We don't condone drinking alcohol, but if you do, because we are living in the real world, here's what you do. You call me, you call dad, you'll never be in trouble. Where once those things start happening, there will be an Uber app on your phone. You can Uber home. If you're not comfortable calling us, here's like 3 or 4 escape methods for any of that stuff. So that, like you said, if you've had the conversation, then you can draw from it. But if you've had no information, how do you come up with that plan in a crisis moment?
On the spot,
right?
yeah.
You can't do it.
You can't do it.
It's really difficult to do. I don't know that if you can't do it. I feel like we've talked a lot about teenagers. Right?
Yeah.
But
what about that middle? What were you going to say?
Oh, I have one other thing on
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
So just off the topic of discipline, but I think it's important. And you kind of brought it up. If they don't feel comfortable, like I have for my daughter, who's 10, so it's not quite necessary, but we have talked about who are the safe adults.
Yeah.
Who are the safe adults that you can call when you don't want to tell me?
Yeah.
And so there are people that I've like reached out to and said, nurture this relationship. Because when she's 15 or 16 or 17, there may be some real big stuff.
Right.
And I want her to have someone that I trust that she can go to.
So funny. I did the same thing.
Yeah.
I did. I have a list on the wall of people they can call in an emergency. And I've said, particularly to Georgia, she and my dad have a really special relationship. And I'm like, he's one of your people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you need something you don't want me to know, he's one of your people. Bert's sister Annie is another one of your people. I said, neither of them will keep a life-threatening, super dangerous secret from your mom necessarily. They'll have to make the judgment call on that. But they're a safe person if you're having trouble. Those are your 2-point people. Yep. And Isla, it's Bert's dad or Bert's mom or his sister. So, and Sandy. And I'm like, you can talk to Sandy about anything.
Anything, yep.
And she's got your back. Same with Georgia. I was like, Sandy's your person. Anytime. I don't need to know you're calling them. And she's already started doing it with my dad.
That's so great.
That's so good.
She talks to my dad about stuff, and he doesn't betray her, but he'll call me and say, why don't you ask a couple questions about this friend Cindy? And that's all he'll say.
That's so good.
And I go, okay, thank you, Daddy. Hey, Georgia, who's this Cindy? And she's like, what are you talking about? I know she's like, probably thinks I'm like omnipotent or something, but he's really cool like that, where he'll just ask a couple questions about the softball coach. I don't remember her name, but one of the coaches, just ask. And I'm like, that's all I need. That's great. And he doesn't even have to do that. Right. He only does it when he feels like it's something I should be
that you really should
involved
know.
In. Yeah.
I mean, it's a tough thing to put. It's a tough place to put your friend in that position. It's my friend Lisa is the one who is like my kid's safe person. Yeah. And it's a hard position to be in because there's going to be times when she may be up against like a real decision about what to tell me and what not to tell me. So you have to be careful about who you're choosing. But
well, I've said to all of them, I relieve you of any responsibility of telling me what's going on unless you feel absolutely I need to know.
Yeah.
I don't need to know what you're talking about. I don't need to know if she has a boyfriend if she tells you before me. I have no ego with that. There's no ego with who she tells first. She tells who she needs to tell, and that's what she needs. So it's not about me. It's about her and what she needs. So remove any concern of taking care of me. You should call me when you're taking care of her, right?
Yeah.
You call me when she needs caring for.
Yeah.
The rest of it is, tell me 20 years from now when we're all sitting around having a glass of wine. Georgia called me this one time talking about this boy. Okay, fine. I don't even need to know then. It's not a secret if it is private. There's a difference between being private and being secret. Secret's sick. Private's not sick. There's some things that aren't my business. It's really not my business. Yeah.
So great though to be able to have an adult to totally safe, non-judgmental adult to run stuff by.
That's not your parents.
Yes.
Because we're too close.
Yeah.
You know, we're just too close. All right. So the 8-year-old, the sweet spot.
Like where my daughter's 10 and my son is 7.
I love that sweet spot. I feel like this is when you can really start talking to them and they're still really malleable and you can, this sounds really manipulative, but you can make them think they came up with something that you really just spoon fed them.
You mean like you do to men or like I do to men?
I try.
It always has to be his idea for everything.
Oh, well,
right?
that's true. Yes. Everything has to be Bert's idea.
Right.
And he's always the victim. Every time. So as long as I can concede that I am always the perpetrator and in my own brain go,
we have similar husbands.
I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't. I think so many women write me and go, my husband's just like Bert. And thank God that you talk about it because I feel like I'm just this patsy. I'm all alone. I'm like, no, we're just so much smarter than they are. Right? They have no idea. But so that age group, as a parent, that's when you're talking about shifting from I'm winning into maybe I'm not winning all the time, right?
Yeah, and it's such an interesting place to be because this is the time too when like outside perception, other people are like I see myself doing it where I am not enforcing boundaries as strongly as I should have. And I'm doing it intentionally and consciously and I have a plan.
Yeah.
But it gets uncomfortable because there's other people looking in, right? Going, what,
judging you.
Yeah,
for how you're doing it.
Why are you being so permissive? Why are you, not like really setting the boundary here?
Like, what's an example of that?
Well, something very silly happened, and this woman was lovely about it. But I was at dinner with my son, who went and filled up his and a friend, and her daughter, and he went and filled up his soda can with just this bright purple awful drink, and I would have never allowed him to get that, but he went and did it on his own. And he drank some, and I was like, okay, you're done now. You're done on that. That's disgusting. You need to stop drinking that. And he took one more big drink and just looked me right in the eyes. And I had that moment of like, oh, that is not okay. And then I was like, no, it is. It's okay that he just did that.
Right.
And then I'm just going to, calmly deal with it and take it away. So there are a lot of just smaller things like that.
Well, sometimes you have to pick and choose.
For sure.
When do you engage in that?
What was I going to do? Yeah,
in a public thing with other people around. There's so much history that you have to take into account.
She had driven, so her daughter was going to have to leave too if I had said we're all going. And I mean, that's like a silly example, but there are other things. There are some bigger things with my 10-year-old that are, I think, more noticeable to people. I can't think of an example that I would want to share right now because I feel like some of them would really embarrass her. But things where, other people are judging it. And that's hard because when you are a parent who's really in conversation with your kid and problem solving with your kid, it's happening usually behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And what's being shown to the world is permissiveness. It's kids getting away with things oftentimes.
It is hard. I judge people 100%. I'll go, well, they're not doing that right. I think it's, it's human nature to do that.
For sure.
But to be aware that everybody has their own path. I mean, we had something happen recently at my house with a kid where we were all like, well, that wasn't handled well. And then the parent self-corrected and explained her self-correction in front of all of us, in front of her kid. And we were like, that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly right. That's the way it's supposed to be. So to have the patience to watch your friend process being a parent themselves, because we're all figuring this out as we go for the most part.
And isn't that the age where you can start to tell which of your friends actually would want to know if their kid was doing anything wrong, and the ones who just, their kid's going to be perfect and they're
yes,
which is really the division, I think, between parents.
It is.
There are two different kinds.
There are two different kinds. I have said to all of my friends, if my kid does something that is not in line with the way I parent, either handle it yourself or let me know. I want to know. I don't think my kids are perfect. and I want to know if they're doing something wrong and I can't see it, I can't parent it.
Right.
So if you tell me, then I can parent it. If Isla hits somebody, feel free to sit her butt in a chair and say, you're not moving for 15 minutes. Do it, because then that's an immediate consequence for her action. But if I don't know about it, I can't help her. Then you're complicit to her bad behavior if you don't let me know. But that is definitely not everybody's philosophy. Some people don't want to know.
They do not want to know.
They don't believe it.
They don't believe it. It's such an interesting thing because you should take your child's side as a parent.
Of course.
Always be on your child's side because you want them to be on their side in terms of helping them be mature
an ally.
people, right? Be an ally. But it's funny because there are some parents where they automatically assume that their child is the victim.
Yes.
And then there are some who are like, I will throw this kid under the bus immediately, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I tend to be I will throw my child under the bus. And it's bit me a couple times where I've realized, oh, you have your story.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. I have several people I know that I go, that's an interesting point of view. That may not be an accurate point of view. It may be 15% accurate, but the rest of it, maybe not. You may be the problem. That's what I think. You may be the problem.
Well, this is one thing we've talked about too, and I think that this is a good age to talk about it. That sweet spot where everybody has a parenting blind spot, right? And it's not because they aren't good parents. It's not because they don't have good intentions. For whatever reason, we just all have a parenting blind spot. So if you really want to know, you ask.
Yeah.
What are my blind spots? What do you see? And think about the way you ask it. Like, how much do you want to know? Maybe you just want to, like, hey, can you help me with this one tiny issue? Or do you really want somebody to like give it to you straight?
I think in high school, they should teach every high schooler communication. Because nobody arrives on the planet knowing how to ask for what you need, say what you really think in a compassionate, caring way. And, Bert, we read the stupid book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, which I freaking hate and love at the same time. And one of the best tools Bert and I got out of that book, I read it before I met him. And then we read it together when we were, probably right when we got married, was to say, I don't need a solution to this. I need to be heard. So please keep your solutions to yourself. And the Men Are From Mars guy said that's what women need. No. That's what Bert needs. So, but he has to tell me that when he starts the conversation, or I'm already formulating, because I'm such a problem solver, and I'm such a how do we get this to a glass half full? How do we tackle this? How do we eat this elephant? But sometimes he needs just to be heard.
He just needs to vent. He needs to
Sometimes
vent
he
and
needs
have
to vent.
somebody who's like, yeah, I hear you.
Completely. And as a parent, I think we have to learn those skills too with our child to say, how could I do better? And not take it personally.
Right.
And say, I need to hear or even from another parent, I need to hear my blind spot and I need to hear it gently.
Right.
I need to hear it from love, not from judgment, but from love.
But you bring up an interesting point in terms of asking your kids that too.
I was thinking the same thing. What do you need? What could I have done that differently, which maybe you wouldn't be willing to do, but still.
But maybe you are.
Maybe.
It's good to know, right?
Yeah.
Because the truth is, I think I've been watching the Ken Burns documentary about country music. Have you guys been watching
I've heard it's
this?
so good.
Oh my God, it's so good.
And I love country music.
Oh, honey, talk to me. I love it too. But one thing that's really stuck with me is, he started with in the 1920s and has gone forward. And I'm now in the 50s and 60s with Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard and those guys. But the shift in family dynamic and the purpose of a child, to me, my impression from watching these is very different now than it was then. And some of that residual, then a child helped on the farm. They didn't go to school.
Right.
They went and worked on a farm. I mean, obviously this is in blue collar, America. They weren't talking about white collar America. I'm not familiar with how that worked in this time period, but I know that was the experience of my family. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. I think my grandfather went through 5th grade, and then he had to work on the farm. So the purpose of a child was very different. It was almost like having a mule.
Yeah.
Like, there's another mule. Perfect. Let's put him in there and pick some corn. But that's not our purpose anymore. But I don't know completely how the human brain has shifted how to discipline based on the new kind of purpose of a family, right? Does that make sense?
So one of the things we were talking about is to look at the outcome. So when you're thinking of how, how to think about discipline, well, what are you trying to achieve with your parenting? And we would say you're trying to raise I use the word resilient, a resilient kid, a kid who has self-esteem, self-efficacy, so they feel like they're worthy of having their dreams met, and they have the ability to have some control over their worlds and move themselves in that direction. So if you're parenting for that,
right,
for an independent person who's going to have the tools they need to make their way in the world and find happiness,
right,
or what you can decide. But that's a very different parent than someone who
you will comply.
Exactly.
Right.
Which is what it was. You will comply. Yeah. That's what my life was. You will comply.
Right.
No, here's a coping skill. Let's practice it.
Right.
Because that's kind of what I've thought. My job is to help them develop coping skills because life will always have hurdles. And my job is to help them build self-esteem that comes from an intrinsic place, not an extrinsic place, something that something about who they are or what they've achieved of their own merit. And that those things are what a healthy adult strives to have, right? When I started my path of trying to be a healthy adult, those were the things that were missing. I had no coping skills. I just drank. That's not a coping skill. And so I don't want my kid to go, well, I'll just drink. They should have some kind of spirituality or practice or thought process or handbook or whatever to go, okay, this is what I fall back on. And I think it comes directly from parenting. So flip side, my dad gave me a lot of things, but they were incomplete. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of parents. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Where you give them a lot. He gave me a lot of skills about hard work, discipline in work, and being a person of your word. If I say I'll be there at 3, I'm there at 5 minutes till 3. And, those kinds of things are very important. But the coping mechanisms of like, I want to go to Cancun and I can't afford to go to Cancun. So I'm just going to run up my credit card debt and I'll deal with it later.
So
that stuff did.
When I'm thinking about this stuff, it would appear or maybe sound like you really have to have your stuff together to be a good parent. And I think there are a lot of adults who don't feel like they've figured it all out even for themselves.
Very true.
Then how do you pass that on to your kids when you have your own insecurities?
Very good question.
You can't give them something you don't have.
My point is the transparency and being real about not knowing, not having all the answers, not being perfect, but doing your best to figure it out and sharing that. There's so much value there.
Yeah.
And so much more value than pretending and shutting down because you don't want them to see that you're not doing it right. It's okay to be a work in progress.
Totally.
Especially if you're willing to share, because it's a thought process that you're trying to teach your kids is how to think about these things, how to go find resources when you need them. So
I love that.
How to move up if you're modeling moving up the elevator and you're consistently modeling that, it's okay to not know, to have some screwed up things that you collect because you're going up.
And isn't it okay to say, I don't know what I'm doing?
I don't know. Or I totally screwed this one up.
Yes.
And I have been doing it for years. But now I'm self-correcting and this is what I'm doing.
Right.
And an apology goes a long way with your kids.
Yeah.
Because I've apologized to my kids, say, you know what? I screwed this one up. I really did screw this one up.
I do it all the time.
I think it's huge.
I never got apologized to by my dad.
Oh,
and
are you kidding?
This day, I'm like, I just want a fucking authentic apology. Just one authentic apology would go so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dream on, dreamer.
I know.
Yeah,
I mean, it's never
dream
going to
on,
happen.
dreamer.
but
I feel like that way too. That ship ain't never coming
It's
home.
such, I mean, that generation, it's so.
Because you were about complying.
Yeah.
You will comply. That was.
And
my
also,
take.
what does failure mean? I
Right.
mean, if it's the end of the world, you can't fail. But when you teach your kids that you're going to fail until you learn to do it differently, that's part of the process.
Yes.
It's part of the process.
I'm so glad you said that because I feel like I feel like I relatively have my shit together, but it definitely did not happen overnight. And I'm 49. So if you're 24 and you have 3 kids and you don't have your shit together, guess what? Neither did I.
Right.
Yeah.
When I was that age,
Right.
I didn't have any shit
Not
together.
at all.
So I can imagine myself as a mom in those days. And I think I would have been better at some things because I would have had less life experience. And then some things I definitely would have been worse than now. So to be where you are.
What would you have been better at?
I think I would have been better at having a really messy house. And I think I would have been better at just not worrying about certain things. I don't think I would have had an awareness of safety stuff that I had as an older mom, right? So I wouldn't have worried as much about Isla climbing onto the countertop of my kitchen. And then as an adult, I'm like, she could fracture her skull. She could blah, blah, blah. She could put her hand in the disposer and turn on the switch at 8 months old. You know,
Right.
I just don't think I had that kind of life experience or awareness to have to be as worried as I was probably as an older mom. And I was frustrated as an older mom because I'd had a career, like
Yeah.
a legit career where I ran my ship till I was 33. And then to have everything stop and be about this other person was not easy.
No.
That was really hard. But I think when you're younger, you haven't gotten comfy and
Right.
used to that. It's not that you haven't had it, but it's very different when you've had it for 2 or 3
Yeah.
years than when you've had it for like 12. And then all of a sudden you're like, what? I can't do anything.
Those first 4 years of a kid's life just suck.
They're
They
really
did for me.
hard.
I mean, it was just, I did not enjoy my life.
It's like a battle. It's like fighting a battle, right? And there's so much positive also.
For sure. They're also
yeah.
some of my fondest memories.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
You know,
It's like the yin yang.
yeah.
It really is full of joy and just despair. I was like, despair. How many toilet tanks can I break? How many? It's very hard.
Well, it's chaotic. And who likes chaos?
It's chaotic and you have no sleep.
Right.
There's
Oh,
no
God, I
sleep.
know.
For those of you whose children sleep through the night, thank God every day or whoever
I
you
know.
thank, because that lack of sleep is just terrible. So I don't know.
But yeah, the not needing to be not even just perfect, but good.
Right.
I think because that's the attitude that gets you in life is that you don't have to know things. You can,
Right.
oh, I want to know that. Realize you want to know it and go figure out how to do it well.
Right.
But it's a process. And if your kids can think that way, one of the biggest problems with 20-year-olds today is they cannot take feedback. Feedback means failure.
Right.
So in the workplace, I hear it all the time that
Really?
millennials cannot take feedback. They shut down, freeze, because it means I'm not perfect. I should have known that, but I didn't. I'm a failure. It's just feedback.
Yeah,
Don't you want
right.
feedback? That's how you get better.
Right.
But if you haven't practiced that mindset of bring it on, give me some feedback. I can do better than this.
Right. That curiosity
Mm-hmm.
to be curious about how can I improve
Right.
as opposed to achieving.
Right.
Yeah.
Just two different things.
There's I did an interview with a woman once whose name, if I remember correctly, is Sue Inquist. And I think she was a coach at UCLA, maybe a soccer coach. And she talked about the concept of failure recovery, which I love so much. And it's one of my favorite concepts is when you fail, can you do it in a way that is really, you bring your best to your failure. So if you, like the very simple example with kids is you forgot your football helmet and now you don't get to play the game. How's your failure recovery? Do you go sit and sulk on the bench, or are you out there like helping the team in the other ways that you can help the team?
Right.
And I think it applies to parents as well. When you fail, do you do it in a way where your best self shows up in that failure, or do you like just sulk and sit there in your failure?
Right. Because really I keep going back to the three roles you can choose: the child, the parent, or the adult. The adult would never sit on the sideline and sulk.
Right.
The adult would stand up with the rest of the team and go, I can't participate, but I'm part of it.
I can cheer. I can bring you water.
Yeah.
I can manage the equipment. I can do so many things.
To choose to be the adult.
Yeah. And so when you fail as a grown-up, you can get angry and closed off, and you know, it has a huge negative impact. Or you can go, I screwed this up. Here's what I learned from it. Here's what I'm doing better.
That's right. Instead of blaming, being a victim, not even of someone else, of your own stupidity or whatever you've decided you're a victim of. I've done the same thing again. I must be an idiot. You know, we have terrible self-talk, I think.
Yeah.
You're right. That one delineation of child, parent, adult has helped me so much, because it is something concrete, like you were talking about earlier, something concrete you can say, no, I'm going to choose to be an adult here. An adult doesn't have ego. An adult doesn't really have any kind of negative agenda. An adult wants to parent a child that is learning, not a child that feels shame or guilt or feels like they're a bad person because they've made a mistake.
Right.
That is a parent in the child, parent, adult. An adult parenting is someone who wants that person to feel their worth while they understand their mistake.
You want
and
them to
that goes
recover,
back to the punitive thing, I think. Just the idea that our kids are not going to come out already having all the values and everything that we want them to have when they're 18 and they're going to leave the house. They have to learn those.
Yeah.
So to be punitive about it, if they haven't learned it yet, you haven't taught it to them.
Right.
Like my daughter was just complaining that you can't get an A in English at her school. And I said, it doesn't seem fair that you won't curve. If not one person in the class can achieve an A, the teacher is not teaching well enough.
That's right.
It is their job. We are paying for that teacher to teach you how to write to a level A. And if not one person can do it, it's their failure, not the kid's failure.
Right.
But it's the same thing about your expectations as a parent, really. If you expect this is going to be a process.
Yeah.
We're both going to do well sometimes and do really horribly sometimes, but we're going to do this together and we're going to get from here to here.
Right.
Then it's not a punitive thing. It's a consequence thing because we learn with consequences.
Right.
Not going to punish someone for not knowing yet because
Right.
we haven't taught them yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about it all the time with drinking, because so often it's a coping technique. Like, I drank so much when I was in high school, so dangerously much, because I was bored and I was unhappy and I didn't know what to do with any of that. And I didn't get punished for drinking, but so often people do, and they're already feeling lousy. They already don't know how to be happy, or they wouldn't be reaching for some maladaptive coping technique.
Right.
And then it's punitive on top of that.
Right.
And again,
So they're not being seen or heard for what's really going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, when I was in high school, my older sister was out, and she needed to, like, she stopped at a convenience store to use a bathroom, and I was passed out in that bathroom that she went into. Oh my God. I just happened to have passed out there. And I mean, I was a disaster. It was a train wreck.
Right.
And there was some real stuff going on with me where I needed to learn how to be happy. I needed to learn how to, you have similar stories, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you need somebody who can have those conversations and really work with you. I needed a lot of help.
Right.
I did not need more misery in my life.
Shame.
Yeah.
Just shame.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what happens, is that people will shame you for something that you don't even understand.
Right.
Right.
And as a parent, I hope I've never done that to my kids. I'd like to think I haven't shamed them for parts of who they are.
I'm sure we've all, truth is we've probably all done it, right?
Totally.
You know,
I was just thinking where I have done it.
You're like,
so,
oh, wait, no.
I got one where I have. I know I have.
For sure. We all have. But as a, general matter of being, if you can try not to do that and try to instead reach for the curiosity and.
Right.
Because they truly don't know other paradigms, our kids.
No.
That's
They've just been in this tunnel where they're just learning those things, and to shame them for when they don't have another way of thinking about it yet.
I had no idea. I remember I was 29 years old, and I was on a date with Mike, with my ex-husband, and he was telling me about all of these hobbies that he had. And I was like, it was one of our first dates, and I was like, oh shit, I'm supposed to like have hobbies. I'm not supposed to go to the bar all of the time. I'm supposed to be an actual person. Okay. That's when I realized, like, that is I mean, I know what street I was on when I was like,
crazy.
Holy shit, I'm supposed to do stuff.
Wait,
That's
I need
fun.
a purpose other than work?
He was
What?
he was going to New York and he was taking pictures from every single street corner, like from different angles of it. And then he was putting them together. And
That's
I was
cool.
like, that's right. It's really cool. And I was like, I would never with my time do anything other than go to a bar. That's the only thing I would do with my time.
How funny.
I know.
Well,
Yeah.
you've clearly moved past that.
I know. Now I'm taking hockey lessons.
I
know.
So fancy. Well, I think back to discipline, right? There are times, like you said, if someone's drunk driving, you have to just stop it.
Mhm.
Is there anything you can think of in that sweet spot or any areas? Like, here's something that this is probably a different subject matter, but during that time period, my kids weren't doing this, but my kids were with kids who were bullying and having like inappropriate behavior at school that needed to be disciplined, right? You needed to say, this stops now and this doesn't continue. And if it does, then what's the consequence for that? So what are those, or if you can think of any, what are those kind of moments where you need to really say, nope, this is over? I mean, you're done.
At the like that age of like 8, 10.
Yeah, in that area.
Yeah. I mean, Kristin, help me out here because my kids have been on the receiving end of that.
Mine
in
too.
fact, we just had a conversation about that. And that's an interesting conversation about when your kids are on the receiving end of it. But I haven't had kids who are on, the giving side of it that I'm aware of.
Right.
And my thought is that I would, there are a lot of ways that I would shut that down, but I've never been in the situation. So,
right.
But the problem is, I think a lot of times it's the parents who don't want to know.
Right.
Who are the parents of the bullies.
Right.
Because I would 100% shut that down. There's not one scenario in which that is ever okay.
Yeah. No.
There would be no privileges. Nothing left.
Yeah.
And I just think there's curiosity there too. What is going on?
Right.
That is in the child's, that's a tool the child is using to navigate that world. There's beyond just punitive, there's something going on. That's an unhealthy way of relating to others.
Yeah.
That I would want that child to get help for.
Right. Well, like you said, what's the payoff?
What's the payoff?
What's the payoff for that behavior for that kid? That would be the question.
Because there is going to be some.
There is some.
And of the kids that I know who do engage in that behavior, there's no conversation that I'm aware of going on with their parents, with the exception of one child. There's one child whose mom is very open about it and actively working. But most of the time it's like, do the parents know?
Right.
That's kind of how they act, as though they don't know. Right. And I don't know, for me, that would be like a big, giant conversation and going on regularly and with everyone. And it wouldn't be something that I was quietly addressing or maybe not addressing. You don't know.
Right.
I also think maybe just a little bit older than what you're talking about, but I remember like 11, 12-ish, there are some girls who are starting to develop and are starting to realize that their bodies are some kind of currency that they can use in the world. And that's so dangerous.
That is dangerous. That I think is an entire podcast because I would like very much talk about that. We had an incident here in this neighborhood with a young lady who was 11 using her body as currency. And I had many conversations with my kids about it because it was a great teaching opportunity for me. But as a parent, if that were my child, how in the world do you address it?
What was that parent doing? Did that parent want to address it?
I don't know what the parent was doing.
I mean, I hate to even call it for an 11-year-old using your body as currency because it's like they're doing it and there's something, there's something else going on.
Yeah.
There's not.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That child is not intentionally, there's so much more to it.
Yeah. It's a hard thing. I don't know. So currencies in that age group, like I was saying we were talking about the teenagers. I feel like the teenagers becomes more of a conversation and a negotiation sort of like with Georgia. When she came in with her apology, then my consequence shifted because I feel like we're more, even though we're not even playing field, we're more even.
Yeah,
But
you
when
can have a
they're-
back and forth.
We can have
Right.
a back and
Yeah.
forth, and it can be logical and it can be problem solving oriented, but they're not quite there when they're in that middle range.
But I feel like they are at an age, if you cannot interrogate, they're at an age where they will share a lot of information. If you become curious just to understand how they think, but not in a way that's so directed. Well, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? But they talk at that age.
Right.
And you can learn so much. I think it's a balancing act because, again, if you're just going to sit them down and look them in the eye and ask them direct questions, they may pull back.
Right.
But they share a ton when you're driving in the car or doing what we talk about, those shoulder to shoulder activities. They are still talkative.
Right.
And though more so than I think sometimes when they get into high school.
Right.
To me, that's what I would be listening for is, what is the worldview of this child of mine? What is if you drew a picture, if that child drew a picture of who they are, and you were going to think of what are the main beliefs that are running their life, especially the core beliefs. I am what?
Right.
I'm competent. I'm not smart. What are those things?
Right.
You can learn a lot just by listening, I think, at those ages.
Right. Right.
Another trick, I think, for those ages is to make sure that you're the one who's giving your kids information, because that's when they start learning about swear words. They start learning about sex. They learn about drugs. Maybe not 8, you're learning about drugs, but 10, you're learning about drugs.
5th grade, for sure.
Yeah. So are you a parent who's behind the ball on that? Or are you out in front going, here's the information, because then they're coming to you as a source of information when you're the one giving it to them. When you're like, my kids are the first ones to know about this because I have this open relationship with my kids. So now they come to me and they're like, hey, we heard this one thing. What's that about?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good way of approaching that, is to be open and to make, things not a big deal.
Right.
It's just part of life.
And when you're the one who when you're the source of information about drugs and alcohol and sex and all of these big things, then there's just more communication about it as they grow older.
That's
when
true.
They're like, my mom taught me about this when I was 8 and it was a regular conversation.
Right. And don't you think, I think a lot of rule breaking or reason for a need for a consequence or discipline comes from at that age, or my experience, if I remember correctly, was about sneaking things that were maybe they didn't think were okay.
Yes.
They were sneaky. Isla was constantly sneaking sodas.
Yes.
And I'd be like, you can have 1 soda. And then all of a sudden she'd sneak another soda. And I'm like, you can't have 2 sodas. That's not good for you. And this is why it's not good for you. It's not good for your teeth. It's not good for your body. It's too much sugar. I'm not doing this to be mean. I'm doing it because it's not good for you. That's the stuff that I kept coming up against was not doing homework, not turning stuff in. And they wanted, Isla was always secret about it. She would go in the pantry and close the door and eat Oreos. And I go, all I got to do is open the door. Like, I know what you're doing in there.
I can hear you.
Who do you think buys the Oreos? It's me.
Yeah.
It's actually your dad. But I at least monitor
Or
the
they'll
Oreo
have chocolate
content.
on their face right there.
Right? And you're like,
you are exactly right. I mean, that's totally what's going on with both of my kids, is that they're figuring out what they can and can't get away with. And one of the things I think is so important is to let them know, without being like hovering in a helicopter parent, but that you're present, that you are, aware. And there's some amount of it that is just laughable, and like sneaking candy, stuff like that. Like, it's not that big of a deal to me, but I usually let my kids know that I'm aware of it,
That's the thing, is to know you're not getting one over on me.
Yeah.
That's what I always say. I know what's going on in that closet.
Right.
And
But it seems like all those things you're talking about are where your values haven't quite settled in.
Yeah.
The kid, they don't, and they really don't. That's why it's that transition period
Right.
of they're not totally rational. They are, but they're not totally buying in. But your arguments haven't. But it's not going to be pretty then. It's just not going to be all perfect and wrapped in a bow. Then it's just going to be some of those times when you just get mad and don't even explain yourself, and then some of the times when you let it go. I think that's like the sticky period. Then.
It is.
Right.
It is,
Yeah.
because it's really clear when they're little what your role is. And it's to me, very clear when they're in their teens. I say this not having teenagers, but
no, but
it's
you're
clear
right.
what I think my role is. But right now, there are times when I'm like, I don't know. Am I going to be permissive on this one, or am I going to like really lay down the law?
Yeah.
I'm curious though. It is interesting because it just made me realize the time I think my son was 9 or 10, and he was asking me. I might have said this on here before, when he was asking me if he had to eat this in order to get the dessert or something, and I just looked at him and I said, you know what? You are old enough to know what I believe about health. I'm out. I'm not refereeing what you put in your body anymore. Do whatever you want. And he hated it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you tell me. I don't want to do it. You tell me. I'm like, nope. You know, if you want to put that in your body. And it was fascinating. But I didn't know that was the response I was going to get. I don't like to be a referee. I think it's annoying.
Yeah. It is.
And he was like, ugh, fine. And proceeded to eat the vegetable or whatever in order, because he knew. So I don't know that would work with everyone. Like, I'm curious if it would have worked with the soda with Isla. You know, maybe not. It just, happened to get lucky that time with him.
Right.
Maybe I just pounded it so many times. And it's, I don't know.
It's one of those questions too. My question would be too, did he complain about but want the instruction, right? Did he complain about it but still want it?
Yeah.
Or was he really ready to let it go? You know, and not knowing he was ready to let it go. Because Isla, if she never sees another piece of broccoli or green item to eat, she'd be so happy.
And she really wouldn't eat it. No, even as an adult, she's going to not eat a...
Maybe as an adult, but right now, today, that child would function on potato chips and pizza and soda. If I left her to her own device and fried rice, that she would eat that 3 meals a day, even though I was the healthiest cook, have been, still put healthy stuff, and she will not. I still have to say, I need you to take some vegetable.
Mm-hmm.
Need you to take some vegetable because the vegetable's good for you. You need the vitamins and the vegetable. I'm still doing the same thing. Georgia will just take it.
Right.
But Isla will not. And she'll still try to sneak that soda.
Right.
Yeah.
To this day.
Yeah.
With all the consequences I've had for her. I'm like, okay, then I'm just not buying them anymore. And I won't buy them for a long time. And she'll go, so I was just thinking about walking to Subway and getting a sandwich. And I went, and a soda? Well, I don't know, maybe a soda. I'm like, yeah, I know you're coming back with a soda and you will have drank all of it before you walk back to my house so that you will have the soda. I'm not dumb. You're not going to Subway. I'm like, girlfriend.
Part of it, there's times when you're like, and by the way, I don't ever say this out loud, and don't say this out loud to your children, but I'm like, God, you really need to up your lying game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, how do you not know how to get away with this?
Oh, it's so funny. What I think is this tenacity will serve you well. Not right now.
Right.
But in life,
yeah,
that tenacity you can't buy. She's tenacious, man. Always have been since birth.
There's something about it just happened this summer for my 17-year-old where he got himself super fit. He just, for some reason, decided to see how fit he could get. And he, lo and behold, made the connection between the Oreos, which he would eat an unlimited supply of Oreos.
Right.
And his body. And he likes his body now. And so he has stopped on his own. The Oreos still sit there because my husband has to have them out at all times.
Right.
And he doesn't eat them.
That's good.
So it's just interesting. There does come a time eventually when you connect because you are in charge of your body and you decide to do something, like exercise or whatever. And
well, it's like Gigi always said, repeat. And at a certain point, they get it.
And I think that is true whether they're 2 and it's hitting, whether it's hitting your sister and you're 2 years old, or is it eating healthy food. Like there is a time when it will connect, but good God, repeating it gets really old.
Yes.
It does.
My pediatrician told me, she was like, is she eating? Yes. Then don't worry about what she's eating. Let her eat. Like put the vegetables in front of her. She knows what she's supposed to do. Like what you're saying. It'll come back around. That's what she says. It'll come back around. Don't worry about it. Because if the choice is, I'm going to eat the pizza or I'm not eating at all, let her eat.
It's the pizza,
Right.
yeah.
So don't worry about it. And she's healthy. She's a healthy weight. She's not overweight. She's got no issues in her body. Don't stress out about she hasn't had a vegetable in 4 days.
Right.
You know, which I do. I go, she hasn't had a vegetable in like 3 days. Unless I like shove it down her throat like a dog giving him a pill.
Right.
You're 1 carrot stick, 1. But she's like, don't worry about it. And then all of a sudden, Isla will have a day where she'll just devour vegetables all day. She'll just eat cucumbers and carrots and broccoli raw and all this stuff. And I go, where have you come from? What has happened? And then she won't eat it again for weeks.
You know, this
like
is totally
scurvy is developing, and then she
Exactly. Exactly right. Exactly. Yes.
This is totally off the subject of discipline. Not really. But if you are constantly talking to your kids about paying attention to what their bodies feel like too, that will eventually come around, right?
Yeah.
If that's just something they hear a lot is, how does that make your body feel?
Right.
Then eventually they're going to go, this makes my body feel like shit.
Right.
Which is what I did eventually with drinking.
Right.
God, it took me a long time to get there though.
Yeah,
there are these
right.
great mindfulness exercises. I did it once with a grape, but where you have you ever done this?
No.
Where you, and you can do this with your kids. I haven't done it with my kids. It'd be interesting to do, but you're being mindful about the grape. So you spend, you're relaxing and breathing, and you spend as much time as you need really using the sense of your eyes, right? Your vision. So you're really looking at the grape, and then you're going to switch to a different sense, and maybe you're going to smell it, and you're a monk, right? So you're going to spend enough time as you can really smelling that grape. And then you put it in your mouth, but you don't chew yet. Point is, really bringing mindfulness to something as simple as eating a grape. And it takes maybe 5 minutes. And it is fascinating.
I bet.
How much is going on when
Right.
you eat a grape and then think about after. And there are just some interesting mindful eating
Right.
things people can do eventually if
Right.
they
That's
care.
cool exercise
Yeah.
though, just to do for fun with your kids and see
Yeah.
how they process
I mean,
it.
I grew up in a household where the food was set down. The three brothers, it was like vacuum. I still eat so fast. It's just
So
not
do
a good
I.
way to be.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
pretty much don't chew. Just suck it down. Done.
Yeah.
Great. Next.
Yeah.
So I could use a little of that mindful eating.
God, that would be an
Me too.
interesting one to do with like the thing that I think is the most disgusting in the entire world, other than Peeps. Peeps are disgusting. Candy corn. I can come up with so many things, but sprinkles, like those. Okay,
Oh, I hate sprinkles.
Ugh. I wonder what it would feel like to do that with a sprinkle. Because like the grape, you can
Mhm.
tell you would love putting like when you finally get to bite into it, but with a sprinkle.
Right.
Like after you stare at it and think about it and smell it and put it in your mouth and
and the waxy coating.
I know, but I
and
wonder if kids would be like, this is fucking amazing.
Right. Best day ever. Okay. So I think what I've gathered from our podcast today is that discipline is relative, right? To what's going on, to who your child is, to the extenuating circumstances, not just the incident,
Mm-hmm.
not just I stole a soda, but what else is going on in life. And to approach discipline from a place of curiosity and of trying to learn who your kid is and help them grow into their best self.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And approach
I think-
it from thinking of the outcome of what am I trying to do with this discipline? I'm trying to help my kid become
Right.
self-reliant, become self-aware,
Comply.
or comply.
Just comply.
Right.
No. To bow. To worship their
Well,
mother.
that's fine too.
That's okay too. Anything else to add?
God, I could go on forever. I just thought of such a huge subject, but no, we'll save it for another time.
I would just also want to end on don't beat yourself up if you aren't doing it all right already.
Right.
Just get into that mode of I'm learning too and going to be transparent and share what I'm learning, because then my kid learns along the way.
That's true. To be open to learning about yourself
Mhm.
through the process of parenting your
Mhm.
child. I know I learned so much about
'Cause
myself.
you said something similar, I think, about I always called my oldest my Zen master. 'Cause
yes.
I felt like that was the mirror. In him, I learned the most important things about myself.
I agree.
Because I was willing, at least I had the
Mhm.
self-awareness to realize this is not about you cute little 7-year-old who's driving me nuts. This
Yeah,
is
right.
about me.
That's right.
Yeah, it brings back like our conversation, our podcast that we did about triggers that we did with you,
Mhm.
where like when they're really pushing your buttons, what is
Right.
it about you?
Right.
Why is that happening?
Right. Yeah, the thing for me too with Isla was I learned to love myself in a very different way by parenting Isla. Like Georgia, I got to go like, good job, you're a great mom, whatever. And, she's Bert internally. So I had a different relationship with her than I had with myself, right? And the relationship I had with myself, not with Isla as myself, but with myself, was very punitive and judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
So to have this young baby show up that has no reason for me to have any punitive feelings toward forced me to change the punitive conversation I was having about myself. So that's the biggest thing that it gave, the gift she gave me was for me to stop being mean to me.
Yeah.
Because if I was going to be mean to me, then why am I not being mean to her? That's really not self-love. Like I thought I had achieved self-love to a certain place, and I had until I was faced with myself in this really young child. So I think if you can find a way of having it heal you, right? Not trigger you. But because it could have easily triggered me. I mean, I could have allowed her to trigger, and she did trigger me. But mostly, my biggest takeaway from having Isla is that I learned to love myself in a different way, in a deeper way, and to accept parts of me that I didn't accept before.
I love that. And it's interesting you bring it up because I have one thing that I've had so much shame about. I'm not going to bring it up right now or ever probably. I will probably never bring it up, but I've had so much shame about it. And just last week I was like, what if one of my kids did that?
Right.
Like how much compassion and understanding and like, okay, what's going on with this kid that this kid did this?
Right.
And it totally like changed the story in my mind about myself, about that one thing.
Right.
It was when I was, a young woman, maybe, I don't know, maybe an older teenager, maybe even still, a kid, but just carried around like, God, I hope nobody ever finds out about that, And then now I'm like, oh no, it actually there should be compassion there with that.
Totally. Yeah. To be able to parent yourself like the child in front of you, right?
Right.
Is very powerful. It's very healing.
Yeah.
Having kids, my kids are such a blessing. I love them so much, and I hope I did okay with them.
Your kids are great.
We'll see, won't we?
They're great.
Someone robs a bank, we'll know. She totally screwed that shame thing up.
We know which one's going to rob a bank.
We
too.
do. It'll be this quiet one. She'll be the one
Always.
plotting.
Yeah.
The one you
is,
don't
right?
expect, right? Isla would be like, she robbed a bank? I was going to do that next week. I just couldn't get around to it. I was doing all this homework for 8 hours. Those 10 minutes of homework 8 hours later. And then Georgia robs a bank? That's what would happen, right? Well, thanks for talking about this.
You.
I think it was a really good conversation.
Thanks for having us again.
Of course.
Yeah,
I love having
you.
you guys. I love talking about this stuff.
I'm like, there's 15 subjects that just came into my mind where I'm like, oh, I want to talk to Leanne about this.
We should write them down again. I still
down.
have a list I added. Last time we were podcasted, we talked about rules of engagement. And I didn't write it on my
that's a good
list.
one.
So when I sent you
That's
the
a
list
good
of what I had,
Yeah.
this morning I woke up and went, because I had an argument with my husband last night. And I was like, damn it, I need those rules of engagement.
That's such a good one. That's a good
So
one.
it's
yeah.
on my list. So I'll have to go in and get my list so we can write it down. I love talking about this with you guys. I really look forward to these conversations because I always come away having learned something every single time you guys come. So that's what life's about.
It is.
Right?
I love doing them too. I always leave and I'm like, oh, I said the stupidest thing. I shouldn't have said that. But I'm getting better about that.
Yeah.
You should get better about that self-talk because you've never said anything stupid.
Oh, I have.
No, you have not.
Oh, you're very sweet.
Oh, girlfriend.
There are just things
you
that I
clearly
haven't said
listened to my
as well.
entire catalog. I've said a lot of stupid things. But thank you for coming and thank you for this conversation. I hope it helps the people who listen. It's definitely helped me. So thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Leanne.